First off, hi everyone. I'm Nadia, and today I'm going to talk about how the pipeline authoring team is working together to put a UI on GitLab CI/CD onboarding. So first off, I just want to make a disclaimer that this is not so much a story of like a really great UX process. It's more of a story of a new team being formed and us just learning to collaborate and work together as a brand new team in conditions of chaos, you could say. So I'll share a little bit how it all began, like what is the pipeline authoring team. So the pipeline authoring team was born out of a verify continuous integration team split. So there was a strategic decision that was made to have more focus on the quality of the CI/CD onboarding experience or the process for authoring your pipeline. So a new team was formed. I moved to the newly formed pipeline authoring team together with my product manager, Dove. We worked on the monitor team before, so we moved together, luckily for us. But we were matched with a set of new engineers that we haven't worked before. And the road to figuring out the collaboration process together has been a bit bumpy. So to give you just general background on what we're up to, our goal is to make the pipeline authoring experience as easy as possible for both novice and advanced users alike. So it's not an easy task given how powerful GitLab CI/CD is and how complex its syntax is. So anyway, let's go back to the pipeline authoring team being born. So what did we get ourselves into? First off, both Dove and I, my product manager, we were entirely new to the world of CI/CD. So we had no background working in CI/CD. We were not all that familiar with the market or even just using CI/CD. And we had to like start prioritizing issues and building up a backlog and also solving immediate problems. So that was fun. And we had a brand new team that did everything differently. So we had to figure that out and everything was confusing there. And also, oh, why can't I move to the next slide? It's freezing up for some reason. Yeah, and we had some immediate problems that we had to start solving right away. Like there were some really big issues that had design proposals that we didn't really understand, that we didn't really understand the problem, that were already scheduled for the next milestone. So we had to move very quickly. We had to really understand, okay, is this how we're going to proceed? So what we did was we started gathering bits and pieces of some kind of understanding of the space and the problems and so on. So we, first of all, we learned CI/CD and we took like an extensive course on CI/CD. We conducted UX research and we consumed all of the existing UX research, talked to customers, talk to other groups and stages to gather their feedback. And we also talked to the developer evangelists, specifically to Michael, who's been a great source of just helping us understand of like what's hot and what's not in the CI/CD space, what do developers talk about, and what are the things that annoy them the most, and what is the general kind of, how do they feel about GitLab CI/CD right now? Because we had research, but that research was also, a lot of that research was pretty old. So it was also important for us to get this like really fresh information. So that kind of helped us a little bit. For some reason, my presentation is not. It's not moving. Give me a second. Not sure if it's the internet or if my computer is really overheated. I might have to actually go back into a room with air conditioning because I think it's just really, really hot. I know we're already over time, but just bear with me. Okay. Hopefully that will help. So, we joined the team and talked to Jason, who was the product manager at the time, who kind of prioritized things for the next milestone or so. And there was this one big issue that we were supposed to take over, and it was the visual builder for the pipelines. And it was a highly upvoted feature and already had some design exploration that Vithika worked on with some initial feedback that was gathered. But keep in mind, so we already have kind of a solution proposed, but Dove and I still don't have a very deep understanding of what's happening. We've literally joined like 2 weeks ago. So it's a bit scary. This issue feels a bit scary. So, but based on the information that we've been gathering, we at least knew, okay, so we had a good understanding of what is our primary job to be done. And we started gathering some insights that helped us understand whether the problem of not having a visual builder is something that we should start working on right away, or should we kind of take it slow and maybe work on things that are a bit more safe. Oh, I apologize for this, but I have to click like 5 times for it to go to the next slide, and then suddenly it like rewinds to too far into the presentation. But here are some of the specific insights that helped us understand whether we should pursue the idea of the visual builder. So first off, we learned that there was a huge learning curve to setting up CI/CD. It's just very difficult to figure out the syntax when you're first getting started, and there's a lot of keywords that you have to use, and there's no easy way to visualize the architecture of your pipeline. Then also we collaborated with the UX research team who did Kano research that this specific Kano model is meant to help you understand where the different features that you have or that you want to build fit into, like, in terms of priority, like what features are most desired by users, what features are must-haves, which means they're non-negotiables and they are expected for granted, basically, and what are the features that would be very delightful, that would have this wow factor. And we learned that a visual builder would be that delight factor and that attractive feature. And another thing we learned from customer interviews was that large enterprises want to create a set of custom pipelines that they want to enforce across their organization. And currently, there's no way to do that. So ideally, what they want is to create like a library of custom templates. Think kind of like a Figma design system where you have a system of components where everyone who's using it can opt into the updates and things like that. So everyone has an up-to-date template. And this is especially important for things like security, for example, where you want to make sure that every project in your organization runs this particular security pipeline or security job. And you want to make sure that it's always up to date as like the manager of the organization. And as a developer, you want to make sure that you are notified of those updates so you can opt in. So basically what we saw is a need for a place in GitLab UI to start making those improvements and to start building out those features, because prior to us working on the pipeline editor, you could edit your pipeline configuration, which is a YAML file, in the file editor that we have. You could edit it in WebID, but most users would just use their local editor, of course, because there was no there was not a lot of incentive to switch to the GitLab editor for them to edit the pipeline configuration. WebID does have some useful tools, like you can see the pipeline status on the right, and you can actually have access to additional information. But if you're already using your local editor, you probably won't switch to a different editor just for that, just to make like some edits to your pipeline. At least, it depends on your proficiency as well, especially for advanced users, that's the case. So we decided, okay, so we have to kind of move forward with this idea, but is like a complex visual builder the way to go? So we decided that, okay, we have to move forward right now. We have to start creating this area, because we're sure that we need a separate place to address those problems. So we created a dedicated pipeline editor in the CI/CD section, which was based on the file editor that we have now. And over time, we added some improvements to it, like a visualization for your pipeline, and we moved the linter as it is inside the lint tab. And yeah, over time, we started adding some more useful features. And the next step would be for us to magically turn it into a visual builder, which of course was not that simple. So based on the things I've been learning in my research and like competitor analysis and things like that, I've been fleshing out the designs for the visual builder and gathering feedback on it. And there's been lots of interesting feedback coming in, but the engineers just kept bringing up the same concern that this is maybe not scalable. And even if we can make it scalable, it will take a very, very, very long time to get it to a point where we can deliver any value. So we were talking about like 6 months of just working on it to make it possible for you to like add a stage or add a job using the UI. And we're not even talking about like some more advanced functionality that you would actually want to set up for like a real pipeline for a real project. So we decided to go back to the drawing board and to just pretend that we haven't really explored any solutions, just for the sake of making sure that we think about the problem first, because we really got kind of stuck in this idea of having this particular type of visual builder, just because of how new we were to the space and because of all of the work that's been done prior to us. And it's been really great, and like based on the insights that were available at the time. But it was important that we kind of walk this road ourselves, and that we go through the process of actually building up an understanding of a problem and then figuring it out for ourselves in a way. So what we did was we hosted a Think Big session for the whole team, where we came to the main conclusion that the idea of just starting to build a visual builder from the ground up is just too risky, especially given that there's so much uncertainty. And we need to focus on just making it easier to create your configuration and to preview it without having to build a YAML file with a UI. So now let's think, how can we do that? So given I was so new to the space, I figured that it would be really great to have support from the engineers from the team who have way more experience with CI/CD. They've been working on the team for a long time, and they might have some really great ideas as well. And even though we've been doing like discussions and issues and things like that, I really wanted to engage them on like on a deeper level, so they can contribute some specific ideas. So I hosted an async sketching session with everyone, and it was a huge success. So I'll share this issue with you. So many team members contributed their sketches. So they were asked to just generate some crazy ideas around what an MVC of the visual builder could be. So we generated lots of different ideas. Some of them were completely out there and not, it would be difficult to implement. Some of them were actually very simple, and a lot of the ideas that I haven't really considered. Some of the ideas also had to do with working with the editor instead and really focusing on the editor experience rather than creating an abstracted UI. So yeah, I had all of these amazing ideas to work with, and I tried to flesh out those ideas just to try out different patterns and different ways to solve the problem. And the main goals were to make it easier to get started with CI/CD, to have a solution that's most simple in implementation, most safe, and also most scalable. So after that, I presented my ideas in a Think Small session, and we very quickly aligned on one of the concepts that I explored, which was the sidebar or the drawer for the pipeline editor. And this was very different. So it's not a visual builder, not really. So we decided that, okay, we mostly rely on CI/CD documentation to guide our users through the process for setting up CI/CD. And generally, once you land onto the right page in the documentation, in the UX interviews, we saw that users are able to figure it out. So our documentation is sufficient to guide you through the process. So let's bring the most important documentation and the most important links and kind of the most important concepts and steps into the sidebar inside the pipeline editor to guide you through a very basic template that you would get. So when you land inside the pipeline editor, you get a basic template with some comments that tells you like what is a job, what is a stage, where the commands go, and things like that. And then you have this sidebar where you have additional information and some tips and tricks and things like that. So it was very easy to align on this because it turns out it's very easy to build because we have an existing drawer component and we can just put the static information there, just text basically. That's what we're going with, and it's currently scheduled for 13.12. So we're starting work on this drawer. And as next steps, we're already thinking of where we're going to take it next. One thing we're working on in parallel is creating some type of marketplace. It's not necessarily going to involve like paid templates. We call the marketplace just as a place that is very discoverable and has templates searchable and easier to navigate and use and so on. So some kind of separate website perhaps. For now, we're thinking of using a separate project or a group of projects that will host all of the templates. And we will be able to link out to those templates from the pipeline editor drawer. So that will really make it much easier for you to find a template for your project. And then in terms of providing a more visual way to build your pipeline, we're starting to think how to leverage the visualization that we have that is just being generated based on your YAML. And how can we surface more rich information in this visualization to kind of bridge the gap between the editing of your YAML and this visualization. So perhaps when you hover over a job, it will show its YAML configuration. So like, what is its script? What is the script that this job is running? And when does this job run? What are its parameters and things like that? And perhaps in the future, you would be able to click on this job and click edit, and it would take you directly to that job inside the editor tab. And these are just kind of some blue sky ideas that we're exploring, and I have an issue scheduled for 13.12 specifically to just explore a bunch of crazy ideas for how we could bridge these two experiences and then run solution validation on different prototypes to gather feedback, because there are really lots of different ways to approach this. There are so many different ways to provide this visualization and provide more support. We could focus more on the visualization, or we could focus more on the editor and maybe providing more syntax highlighting and things like that, working with that. So I think at this point, gathering more feedback will be very important, but I'm very happy that we're able to just move forward with such a simple solution like the pipeline editor drawer. And I think it's going to have great impact on CI/CD onboarding, and gives us lots of flexibility because we can play around with what kind of content we show there. We could even make it conditional depending on what type of onboarding path kind of the user goes through and what they're most interested in. It would be quite easy to show a custom get started template, for example, depending on their project type and things like that. Just wanted to point out that I think the reason that we involved engineers so early in this ideation process, and they were so involved in the actual brainstorming of just like making wireframes and coming up with all of those ideas, it really helped us align on this MVC solution and feel like we have a better shared understanding of where we're going with this feature, which is not the case for all of the work that we've done. We had some other features that didn't go so well because we weren't able to include engineers actually so early on. So yeah, thank you so much. Hopefully this journey was helpful to someone to learn from it.
It absolutely was. Thank you so much. I loved hearing it because improving the ease of use of CI/CD and making it easier to understand and easier to onboard, that's such a requirement for so many other pieces of our entire product. And so it's really vital for the success of the entire DevOps lifecycle. Thank you. The first question we actually have from a product manager. This is the first time in a UX showcase. I'm really amazed by this. Thank you so much, Victor, for joining. And you're up for the first question.
Hey, thanks. It won't be UX related. It's more, it's super interesting that how you presented that you are meeting the team and all that stuff. And the question that I would have is related to that part is that what were the engineers actually doing, and how could you provide directions to them as you were just catching up with CI/CD, and how long did it take this period? Whether you just relied on the already inherited issues and let them work on it, or you still had some understanding and direction around those?
Yeah, so great question. So partly we were relying on the backlog of the issues that already existed. So a lot of the issues were not as risky and big and scary as the pipeline editor, like Visual Builder, things like that. A lot of the issues were more known problems where there's been feedback that's been gathered throughout years, and it's known that this thing doesn't work really well. So you know, obviously I had to just have a lot of conversations with engineers, even about the tiniest of issues, to just gather more context. Generally, you know, Dove and I ended up not really blocking anyone because we chose to kind of move quickly and break things, which we did in some ways, you know. So the design process for this feature, I think, was pretty successful, but we have another example of collaborating together on the new layout for the pipeline graph, which we started refactoring the main pipeline graph in the pipeline page right when Dove and I joined. And we knew that it was very important. We have to move forward. But because we didn't know so much, like a lot of information was lost between Dove and I and the engineers. So, you know, we just kind of moved forward on things where we had highest levels of confidence. And then wherever we could, we tried to figure out MVCs, and the things where we had to gather more insights, whether we wanted to or not, we were forced to kind of pause, and we had to go back to the drawing board many times.
And could you communicate any expectations for the engineers at the beginning of this process? Like, could you tell them that, look, guys, in the next 2 months, we are going to do whatever we can, but just expect new stuff after, or something like that?
I don't know. I think a lot of the work that had to be done was kind of back-end work. So we were also lucky that kind of gave us a bit more time. In terms of setting expectations, we probably could do it better, because there were things that we couldn't provide sufficiently, and there were things that engineers couldn't really provide, and it was just purely out of miscommunication and not really knowing yet how, like, the best ways to communicate to each other. you also asked how long it took. Maybe 6 months. I think now it's month 7, and at this point we're just starting to learn to work together. And I'm happy that we had some like high points in addition to the low points, which is to be expected in a situation like that.
Thanks. I actually really like what you are doing now, so it's great. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks.
Awesome. I think the next question is coming from Michael.
Yeah, next one is actually more like a comment. I really like that you and your PM actually said, okay, maybe this is not right, and went back to the drawing board, because most teams would just double down and continue. So I really like that you could see that some parts were getting a bit too hectic, and then going back and then delivering on like the list of templates. I think that kind of solves like one of the key problems of companies when they're using the same templates. So yeah, kudos on that.
Yeah, I just
And
wanted
then,
to just to that point, I just wanted to say that I have to say thank you to the engineers for that, because we had a lot of pushback from specifically front-end engineers in our team who really took the time to explain why they think this will lead to problems and why they think it's not maybe the most scalable solution, and that we need to explore other approaches, because you know, we were a bit stuck kind of in that vision, and they really helped us get unstuck. And also the exercise that followed helped us generate all of those ideas. So it was the engineers were definitely kind of leading on that.
that's really good to hear. It's a group effort, right? It's just not engineering and design, so not just design and product. So yeah. So the next point as well. So if you do revisit building the pipelines and steps in that, I came across something called Blocky. It's used for teaching kids how to program in Sketch, but there's other complex scenarios of it. It might be something that's worth looking into. I don't know what the license is on it. It's made by Google, but yeah, it's kind of like this block builder thing. You can build loops and pipes and stages and things like that. So something to keep, yeah, just something to keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah, actually about Sketch, this is something that we're definitely looking at, this approach, and teaching how to use CI/CD is something that we really want to focus on. So now we're just taking these baby steps, but we have some blue sky ideas about having like a drag and drop interface. And you know, these things we will be exploring and validating over the next quarters. So it will be interesting where it leads. At this point, we're trying to not be too attached to any kind of UI, because it seems like we're learning more and more every day. So I think I really like that we're taking it really step by step. And I love that I won myself a bunch of time to explore a bunch of crazy ideas.
Pedro, I think you're up next.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nadia. Great presentation. It's a very interesting challenge for sure, and not easy to solve. I really enjoyed how you scaled it back and thought about exactly what people were needing and prioritizing that first for the MVC using the drawer. I think that was a very interesting idea. I wanted to talk a bit about the Kano model research and wanted to understand how did you get that insight that people wanted a visual builder? And specifically, did people say that, hey, I want a way to visually build this? Or did you infer that from how they talked about their needs and problems?
Yeah, so actually, I will have to share a link to this research. But the way Kano model works, it basically provides you with kind of quantitative data on what features are most attractive, what features are must-haves, and so on. And it gives you like a number of how high a specific feature ranks according to like some attribute, like the attractiveness of the feature, for example. And the visual builder ranked at the very top of the list for attractiveness and delight. And I will link the research so you can dig into it. It's very interesting. I didn't run it, so unfortunately I can't talk about like all the intricacies of the model, but it's basically a really, really big survey that gathers lots of data and uses some complex algorithm to calculate those scores. But it was, of course, we also did just, more traditional problem validation interviews where we talked more to people about their needs. But it was really interesting to supplement that data with this more quantitative data, because it's not usually something that we do for prioritization, running a survey like that. And it was quite helpful, especially for Dove and I being new to the space, to understand kind of what is a must-have feature and what is a delightful feature. It's not really surprising that a visual builder would be a very attractive and delightful feature. But it's been proven again and again. Just every time we talk about the visual builder on Twitter, people just go crazy. So even though we know that it's not really something that we will pursue right away, it's something that we want to keep fleshing out over time and see if we can find an approach that will eventually be feasible for us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that was my impression as well. I never used the Kano model, but I know how it works. But yeah, I would be interested in looking at the data, and this was very good. Yeah, my next point is also, yeah, I don't know if you can answer to this, because as you said, you weren't involved in the research, but maybe you've heard about it or not. Did you get any feedback about not using YAML file for CI configuration? And that's, I mean, the standard that we have at GitLab. I wonder if there are people that don't like this and would prefer to manage it through a settings UI with fields that are saved to a database. And the reason I ask this is because we currently have the code owners file, which is, it's a file that's managed in the repository and it's versioned. And there are other approaches to that configuration, which is to use more of the settings with fields saved to a database. And I think there's also security scanning configuration, and that was shared in the previous UX showcase, where they're considering how they're going to do this, and if it's going to be a file, if it's going to be fields that save to a database, or a visual builder like you're doing now. And so I think you're opening the way for many other features to build on top of what you're doing here.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's been some discussions around that, but generally, from all of this discussions we've been having with the engineers, the point is that switching from YAML would be very difficult, given how complex it is. And we're adding new features all the time. We're adding we'll probably be adding new keywords that can be used with the YAML configuration and so on. That's one thing. And second, versioning is very, very important to some of CI/CD users, particularly to enterprise customers. Versioning is actually like a very important requirement for them to be able to version all of their templates. So the idea for an enterprise having a library of their custom templates is it aims to solve one of the problems, that is keeping track of the versions of the templates and making sure that all of the organizations that are using that library use the latest templates, and they get notified when a template is updated. And there has to be version history for compliance reasons, which is also very important. So, we could probably figure out like a version control system either way, but it would probably be costly. So basically, we're not really looking at switching anytime soon, but this is something that we should definitely be thinking about. Just there have been discussions. I will pull up issues for this. Just I will have to really dig for it because we haven't really gotten back to those in a while. But I will link them in the notes.
Yeah, thank you. And I believe that the main and you're right, we could still build a versioning even if it was saved to a database and all of that. The main concern or the balance that I've heard between having files, fields that save to a database or a file that is versioned is that when you have fields and it's usually in a settings area, it's not as transparent as having a file in a repository. And so it's more difficult for someone to request changes or to propose changes. But on the other hand, the problem with the file is that it's not as approachable and user-friendly for someone that is a beginner. So I think what you're doing here with the visual builder could probably be the best of both worlds. You're good for beginners, but at the same time, you're maintaining the transparency, the versioning, everyone can contribute, extend, fork practice. So I think, yeah, maybe this is a good thing. And yeah, thank you for doing this work that all of us will learn from.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, this is exactly what we're trying to do. So our goal is to provide those capabilities for enterprise customers who want version control and compliance. And also they have extremely complex pipelines that it would be very difficult for us to have all of that in the UI. But the things that I will be exploring for kind of bridging the gap between the editor and the visualization that we have and finding ways to connect them. I think there's lots of interesting things we can explore there to improve the user experience for those who are new to CI/CD or maybe not as technical and so on.
Yeah, I don't want to, just a final question because we're already over time, but do you think there could be a possibility for the work that you're doing to document it and abstract it in a way that other areas of GitLab could use it? Like, for example, the drawer example, would you be able to document some guidelines of, hey, if you want to do this for another kind of configuration, here's what you need to have in mind and so on?
Yes, for sure. At this point, we haven't really started the implementation, and we kind of have a general idea of the limitations the drawer component has. But once we kind of know more, and once we go through the process, I will definitely make sure to document it and share it widely. And another thing, we are collaborating a little bit with the teams that are trying to accomplish similar things, like the quality, what is it called? Quality management, compliance and things like that, security. So yeah, there are lots of teams that rely on YAML configuration to enable their features, basically. We need to be in touch with them all because ideally we need to have one type of experience to do that, to create a pipeline. And it seems like we're now kind of starting to diverge a little bit. So there is a need to for us all to collaborate more. So hopefully this UX showcase will help a bit as well.
Awesome. Sounds like we got some really exciting things coming up. Thank you so much.